So guys, we've just had the Mexican Grand Prix. It was a long race, that one actually. It was all about strategy, and we'll go right to the start. What a brilliant start by Max Verstappen. Held off the two Mercedes and then just ran off to in the distance with that one. Hamilton made the move on round the outside. It was a brilliant move actually on George Russell to get up into P2. That let Russell sort of out of line. And that let Perez through, which was a shame for Russell, because it looked like the two Mercedes had the pace to hold off at least one of the Red Bulls anyway, because Perez couldn't really make much inroads into Lewis Hamilton today. The start of the race was all Lance Stroll. He started last place. He made up 5 places on the start. What a mega start from him. The Aston Martin and Vettel also started pretty well, made up 2 places there. Alonso up into P7 also. The bad starter there was Valtteri Bottas. He started up the field in P6, dropped a couple of places back to P8 off the start line there. Strategy of the day for me was Daniel Ricciardo. He was absolutely mega today. He's got my driver of the day as well. He went long on the first stint, then went onto the softs, and he absolutely made that pay some mega moves to get up into that. He made a bad mistake with the incident of the race with Yuki Tsunoda trying to get a quick jibe into the tight right-handers on that circuit. I can see what he was trying to do, but he was just too far back. Unfortunately, he took Yuki Tsunoda out, and that was the only retirement of the race for him with the incident. Actually, Alonso then had a engine problem, and he was also out, which is a shame for them too. But only 2 retirements, and we were expecting a bit more with the thin air down there in Mexico, and expecting more engine issues. But you know, we did hear Mercedes or Lewis Hamilton often complaining about the engine cutting out in the race, so I'm sure that's just down to that rather than him actually carrying some issue. But it was just a race of strategy really. The 2 Red Bulls starting on the softs and the 2 Mercedes starting on the mediums. The Red Bulls then went on to the mediums after their first stops, and the Mercedes went on to the hards. And the idea was that Mercedes were planning that the mediums on the Red Bulls would fall off, and then at the end with them on the hards, with them having to go quite a long way on them tyres, they would, you know, have the better tyre at the end and could close the gap. But the Red Bulls have shown again that they've been very good on their tyres. I mean, Sebastian Vettel's shown he got like up to lap 40 on his soft tyres, so tyre wear was really low. I think Mercedes probably could have picked up on that. Maybe pitted one of them early. George Russell was screaming on the radio to get in early for some softs, so maybe a bad strategy call from Mercedes. I'm surprised they didn't go for split strategy with the 2 Mercedes drivers to try and put some pressure on the Red Bull in terms of strategy. Maybe one on the mediums and one on the softs. Maybe especially for George Russell, he could have tried and get that place up into P1 on the start, but with the more grippier tyres. But they didn't really go for that, which is a bit of a surprise. I expected them to be a bit more aggressive to try and get that first win. And we've seen some good battles down the mid-pack with the 2 McLarens and Alfa Romeos, and also the Alfa Tauris. Gasly making some good moves, then dropping back as the tyres scenarios split, because they tended to have a medium soft split. There was some guys going on to the hards, but they didn't really work out. Anyone that went for the Daniel Ricciardo strategy of mediums and softs, it really paid well for them in the end. The surprise of that one was really Lance Stroll. He was the first to pit. He started on the mediums and was really struggling for soft tyres, where his teammate on softs just kept going. So strange why Lance Stroll was struggling on the tyres on that one. And so go to the teams. Let's see, start with Ferrari. That was just a poor weekend for them to get. Had no pace. They were just the slowest of the top 3. Had enough pace to cover the Alpines and the McLarens in the end. But just no pace. I mean, Leclerc finished in P6, Sainz in P5. They were about 30 odd seconds behind P4 in George Russell. no idea why. They just really struggled over the bumps. We've seen even Leclerc in the race having a big moment in the S's where he had a crash on Friday. And so it just seems like their car just didn't suit or like the curbs, couldn't ride the curbs well, and they just lost pace and confidence probably in that car throughout. The Mercedes, Hamilton P2, Russell in P4. I think in hindsight they went on the wrong strategy. The hards just didn't work. They weren't fast enough. And the mediums probably could have gone a lot longer if they'd gone for a split strategy or more aggressive with the softs mediums, or maybe in a two-stop with George to see if he could do that in the end. They literally just followed each other with the same strategy call. I think they just thought that was fastest. I thought they probably could have just pit George early and try and get that with 20 laps to go, just go on the softs and just tell him to hit, qualifying laps, because even at the end George Russell pitted for the fastest lap. He got fastest lap of the race. With 1 lap to go he went onto the softs, and he was nearly 2.5 seconds quicker than Sergio Perez, so maybe he could have made that time up for 20 odd seconds if he'd pitted for the softs. We've seen Danny Rick make that pay, and what a brilliant drive from him. So a bit of a shame for Mercedes there. They seem to have the pace. Their car is now working well. Good to see them back at the front fighting, but just not the pace for the race wins, but solid points. They're now 40 points behind Ferrari. Could they nick that second place of Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship? That would be a massive result, and what a downer for Ferrari that'd be. I mean, they've seemed to have the fastest car for most of this season, or at least half of it. And let's move on to the Red Bulls. Max Verstappen, he was the winner of the race. Absolutely mega, just had the pace throughout. Brilliant on his tyres. He extended his first stint on the softs longer than, and just managed to keep Hamilton behind, who kept good distance behind. He was only about 1.5 seconds in that first stint behind Verstappen and Hamilton. It then, when Hamilton went on the hard, he just seemed to drop back, and he won the race by about 12-13 seconds, which was comfortable for Verstappen in the end. Sergio Perez, a solid race. Interesting, he couldn't really have the pace of Verstappen, didn't really make much inroads into Lewis Hamilton, even on the mediums, with Hamilton really struggling on the hards, just often complaining a lot. But a solid third place for him. He kept George Russell behind about 4 or 5 seconds. In the end was the gap between Perez and Russell. But solid race for Perez, his home race. Great to see him on the podium there. Then on to the McLarens. Danny Ricciardo finally back. He had a race of not much interest at the beginning. Was sort of slowly dropping back. He obviously started P11 and was back like 12th, 13th at one point. Didn't get a good start. He dropped a couple of places in 13th, 14th. Had a good battle with Zhou Guanyu early on. Finally made that pass on him. The hit Tsunoda on lap, I can't remember what lap it was, but then he then got a 10-second time penalty for that, which I thought was a bit harsh because there was a gap there. Probably we've seen 5 seconds given for that in the past, but he made an absolutely mega drive on the softs and then was just flying. I mean, he was so far ahead. At one point, it looked, even with that 10 seconds, he might still fall behind Norris, but he was absolutely mega. Made 10 seconds up on Ocon and kept that P7. Lando Norris, solid race. He started in 8th, finished 9th though. He stopped for hards on lap 52, and that really didn't quite work out for him. Went long on the mediums, and I don't think that was the strategy for the day. Going on to Alpine, Alonso was in a strong position. It became apparent that he was having some issues because he was on for a solid race and then just slowly started to drop back. He's trying to nurse that engine, I think, just try it through to the end. It paid. It's had enough. Towards the end, called the virtual safety car. I was at that stage with about 5 laps to go where I thought George Russell might come in, but it didn't happen. There was an opportunity for a cheap pit stop there. But yeah, it's a shame for Alonso that he was visibly frustrated when he got out of the car. because he was on some solid points, and it's important for their battle with McLaren for that 4th place. Ocon finished in P8, started P10. He pitted on lap 34 for the hards. Some good battling. He kept Bottas, got a good move on him actually. Bottas came in for the hards, and Ocon had already pitted for the hards. He came from a long way back. I think really took Bottas by surprise and nicked that place off him, and then did well to hold him off, and then a solid finish in the end for him. Haas, Kevin Magnussen, just sort of dropped back. He was started last, then got quite far up the field, about 13th, 14th at one point, and then finished in 17th. He stopped on lap 40 for softs, but didn't quite have the pace to make it forward like we've seen with Daniel Ricciardo. Mick Schumacher, he started on the soft tyres, then went on to the mediums, had a really poor stop, unfortunately for him. Dropped him back, but he's beaten his teammate, so solid weekend for him. Shame, he could have been a bit higher up than that. Lost about 7 or 8 seconds in the pit stop for him. On to the Aston Martins, Sebastian Vettel, solid race for him. He was got a good start up into 2 places, pitted on lap 40 for the mediums. He came out on lap 16th, made a couple of places up to 14th, but didn't have the pace that we seen last weekend in the Aston Martins. Lance Stroll, he started last, as I say, mega start, got 5 places. Then just dropped back really struggled with his tyres in the first stint, and then he went on to the softs, finished in 15th. Solid race for him. Alpha Tauri, Pierre Gasly started 14th, made up 3 places in the race to 11th. Got a 5-second penalty for driving Stroll off the track. He literally just went in the inside lane, braked late, ran Stroll wide. He went off the track himself. It looked like a slam dunk penalty. I'm surprised he didn't just go for to give the place back immediately to avoid a penalty. I think that cost him in the end. But a solid race for him. Yuki Tsunoda, he got taken out by Danny Rick. Was on for a decent race. He's been faster than Gasly most this weekend, to be honest with you. Then on to the Alfa Romeos. We've seen Bottas started in P6, finished P10. At least he's got a point for Alfa Romeo there. He just seemed to struggle as soon as he went onto them hards. Went long on the mediums. And shame that didn't really work out for him. He had a really good qualifying, started really quite high up, so it's a bit of a shame for him there. Went on to the hards, lap 40. He just finished in 10th. Zhou Guangzhou, solid fight, could hold him back. Daniel Ricciardo early on, finished in P13. The Williams, solid drive from Albon actually, started in P17, finished in 12th. He did the mediums and the softs in the end, so that worked out for him, making some good places up. Nicholas Latifi, he started on the softs, pitted for the hards, and just ran out of tyres. He just ran last for most of the race. He was 2 laps down actually in the end, the only driver to get lapped twice. It was a pretty average race, I've got to say. Apart from Daniel Ricciardo, it was great to see him back. Some good places and some good moves. Brilliant strategy call from them to go onto them softs at the end, and he really was on fire. I think he needs to start with a 10-second penalty every race to make the most of it and see him right back up the grid. But it's been a season dominated by Red Bull. We've got the blue for Red Bull, as we're seeing at the background here. Again, he's got the most wins for Red Bull in a season with 14 wins. Passes Lewis Hamilton for the most wins in a season. Obviously now you have more races anyway than we've seen before. So, I think Max Verstappen acknowledges that one, but a brilliant result for them. They're construction champions, drivers champions, and you can see why they've been absolutely brilliant all season, and well deserved for them. The cost cap penalties all come to an end now. Hopefully we can move on for that. Let's see how that plays out in the future for them. But we're on to Brazil in 2 weeks' time, a circuit that I absolutely love. I can't wait to see that one. We've seen a master drive from Lewis Hamilton there last season. It'll be interesting to see how Mercedes hang up there. Will they can carry on that pace we've seen for the last couple of Grand Prix? And could we have a closer fight with the Red Bulls there? It's a shorter track, so I expect it to be closer up at the front there. But yeah, brilliant weekend. Loved the Mexican Grand Prix. Shame the race didn't pan out as we had kind of expecting at one point. It would have been greater to see if there was a bigger differential between the tyres, but they all held out, even the softs going really, really long. I think Pirelli probably made a mistake just bringing sort of tyres that were just too good and too durable for this weekend. Didn't quite see the degradation that we've seen before, which would have made it, you know, we could have got that crescendo at the end, but it didn't quite work out. But let's see how we get on in Brazil. A brilliant race though, nonetheless, not as exciting as we've seen before, but some good racing there. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Please like, comment and subscribe. I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.